So you gave a show of hands, right? And it seems like a lot of people here has been to VidCon, but it's really the manifestation of the fandom that's going on in this space. And we actually did shoot some stuff from there last year. So for those of you who haven't attended, hopefully this captures a little bit of that excitement. Those are really the new rock stars. It's really exciting to be there, but I think you've been there before you joined on last year to curate the industry track almost every year since it started, right?
Yeah, I've been to every one. I did an online video company called Revision 3, which we sold to Discovery, and we went to the first one. We sponsored every subsequent one. I think I spoke at every one except the first one. So yeah, that was the 6th VidCon that just happened a couple weeks ago.
So what are your main takeaways from this year, except for it almost doubling every year or something like that, right?
Yeah, well, for those of you who haven't been to VidCon, what was new at VidCon this year is it's always been a fan. It's designed to get communities and creators together. 15,000 fans, you saw a lot of them there, went to go meet their favorite YouTubers and sign, but also to hang out with each other. So it's very much of a community thing across the board. There's been an industry component to it, very much around the online video industry, and that grew to 3,000 people this year from 2,000 last year. That's the part that I ran. And there was a new track for creators, for people who weren't necessarily full-time video creators, but wanted to learn how to make videos, how to work with brands, how to think about it, how to get better. 3,000 people there too. So I thought, first of all, it was really interesting that we had a lot of people show up that want to be in this space, or that are already doing it and want to be better, which I think is awesome. But one of the main takeaways for me at this year's VidCon was, first of all, it's not just a YouTube world anymore. There are all these different platforms and ways for people to reach audiences that you need to be concerned about. And I started thinking about each of these new platforms, or even some older platforms, as video formats, right? So YouTube owns some really good video formats. They own music videos, they own vloggers, and a couple of other things. But think about Facebook. Facebook is starting to own this video format that maybe doesn't have a VO track. Maybe it's just visual that you watch mobile, that you kind of serendipitously roll across. You don't go out and search for, but it just shows up and you start looking at it. Snapchat, very different format. That's like these little 9-second chunks or less that people build into stories. Instagram is its own format. We saw Periscope, Meerkat. YouNow is another live streaming company that I think is doing really interesting things. It's its own video format. So in many ways, these platforms are the way we used to think about formats in the past, like comedies and dramas and westerns and things like that. So that I think was really fascinating. And that the people who are really good at one format or one platform aren't necessarily the ones who are good at others. Some people cross over, some people don't. But for a brand, I think it's really important that you understand and work with all these different formats, these different platforms, because your audience is across all of them.
Right. I mean, it's an amazing space, and I want to bring you guys into the conversation too. Vincent, I mean, if you look at it from wearing your hat as the head of media at Ayzenberg too, I mean, we saw 3,000 people, or is it 2,500, 3,000?
3,000 creators, 3,000 industry, 15,000 fans.
Yeah. So
21,000 total.
Yeah, so I mean, it's grown a lot. Why this industry interest in this space too?
Well, it's really all about understanding how to reach consumers in new ways. Now, some of the core objectives of brands connecting with consumers haven't changed, but it's about understanding this broadcast agnostic style or environment in which we now live in. Is understanding how to better connect and understanding that the age-old techniques of engaging in a monologue type of approach with consumers just don't work anymore. it's really about understanding how to connect with them in new ways and using social natives to communicate and connect in a social native way to their social native audience.
Right.
And that's
So
what
that's
VidCon
becoming a really
represents.
important media vehicle you're seeing, with clients and stuff too. That
Absolutely,
this is
it's in our eyes a mandatory part of the new media ecosystem. It's a combination. I'm not saying that you throw out old conventional media altogether, but it's now about encouraging or engaging clients and letting them know that there's a new form of media that needs to be a mandatory part of the media mix.
Right. And John, taking the investor angle on this, the corporate development angle, why we've seen a lot of money shifting into this space. So why are investors so interested in investing in this? Because they do invest in future growth, right? And some of these platforms and companies and stuff like that might not really be that profitable yet.
They're investing in a number of different things, including sort of the seismic shift in what type of content consumers want, particularly on the youth audience side. I think when we look back at the MCN space, and you take a look at the Maker Studios deal, and everybody's asking questions, why would Bob Iger pay all that money, or why would he do that? To some extent, the history of M&A and the history of investment in the online world has always been the old guard, buying the new DNA and making buy decisions versus build decisions or investment decisions. So I think we've seen an incredible amount of media money flowing from older groups, Warner Brothers, RTL, you name it, definitely the Disney folks, into these newer forms of content. And to Jim's point, they come from a DNA where they understand these very narrow vertical channels. And we heard it earlier in the day today that the TV guys are pulling their hair out or whatever based on the fact that they don't understand this gazillion channel cross-platform world. And generally, if you look at the history of mergers and acquisition and investment, particularly strategic investment, people will buy over build when they don't have the DNA, and they'll inject the DNA. And I think getting back to the Maker deal, that's what Disney was doing. They said, we get this form of media, we've dominated in this form of media, we don't have that DNA here. It's a small amount of money for us to pay to get an audience. We all recall that the WhatsApp deal that went into Facebook. If people didn't know the numbers, WhatsApp had 10 million in revenue and something like 138 million in losses, but 450 million users. And Mark Zuckerberg's quote on that deal was, anybody who's built that much of an engaged audience that fast is incredibly valuable to us when asked, how do we make money off of it? So circling back around to what's the rationale? It's engaged audiences.
Yeah. I want to open it up to questions, but one more thing that I'm interested in to hear from you is, you curated the industry track, but did you learn something new that you weren't expecting from listening to all the speakers and everyone that you put there on stage?
Yeah, look, I think in part it was the platform stuff that I think was really interesting, but also, and when I thought about crafting the industry track, I wanted to bring more folks from brands and from agencies and more investors as well. And as I started pulling those threads together, I started realizing that there were brands that were way far ahead of where I thought they would be.
Right.
And like Rob was talking about what he's seeing from Pixability and what people are doing. And the ways that people are engaging with audiences using the new tools on YouTube and other ways and driving real results for brands, I was very, very encouraged by. So we had a Secret Deodorant and 11th Gorgeous did a case study. It was fascinating what they've been able to do with these wonderful, two wonderful creators from Alabama. And I'd had Mountain Dew came up and showed what they did with the launch of their new energy drink. And what they were able to do with Snapchat around the Super Bowl was really interesting. And then the way a lot of brands are starting to embrace it as well. So David Beebe from Marriott is recreating that brand, building a content company inside of Marriott. I was fascinated by. And Purina as well. I know what Purina's been doing because I worked with Rick there a little bit when I was at Revision 3/Discovery. But I think many brands and agencies are a lot further along than I even thought they were.
Right.
And doing really creative things. So good job, everybody who's doing that. That's awesome.
Good reach out to the audience there. Okay, so let's, do we have any questions here for anyone? Otherwise, I got a ton here, so I'm gonna keep it going.
You know what, I want to riff a little bit on what you were talking about, if you don't mind.
Sure.
On the way that, and we saw this at Revision 3 and Discovery, I see it more and more now, is that, particularly for the fans that show up at VidCon are basically between 13 and 23 years old. Very much Gen Z with, the tail end of Gen Y. And they look at these creators, and we saw this when we were doing Dignation at Revision 3, as they're not on a pedestal, they're friends. It's a friend base.
Exactly.
And it's very much that to work with those communities effectively, and this is why I was really, really pleased to see a lot of brands doing this well, is it's not just like diving into the community and scattershotting like a shotgun a bunch of messaging and diving out. The ones that I think do it really well, I'd be interested in what you think, were the ones that come into the community and want to be members of that community and want to bring things to that community or allow the community to do things or go places they couldn't otherwise do. And they go in with a commitment to be part of that for, I won't say forever because nothing's forever, but really they want to be part of it long term. I don't know if you're seeing that as well, but
it's all about long-term engagement.
Yeah.
So it's really taking the best of CRM marketing and applying it to influencers. And then also taking a step back as a brand, which is a risky proposition, but then knowing that the best way to engage with engage an audience is to let others do the talking on your behalf.
Right.
Others that they respect,
You
they
gotta let
care
go,
about,
right?
and
Yeah.
you gotta let go.
and how hard is that?
It's extremely hard.
Yeah.
I mean, brand marketers are wired to not let go and be control freaks. So it's really about this new age of marketing where you got to take a step back and trust that things will work out the way you want it to.
Jim, to add to what Vincent is saying, and they've got to get used to the generational shift, and we've all read about millennials and the recasting of what millennials are like. They're like this, and Generation Z has its own characteristics, and that generation I was at VidCon too. I mean, it was incredible. The buzz, the intensity coming from those kids at VidCon, the fans who are also peers with the creators. I just think it's more of a question of the brands really looking at it like, we've got a new audience type here, and to Vincent's point, we can't control them. They won't be controlled. We have to let them do what they organically would like to do, and as brands, we have to integrate our messages with what kind of content they want to consume.
Yeah, it's about taking a step back and basically enjoying the ride. And,
Right.
And if you have a really strong social community, then that community will actually act as your police. They will actually ensure that everything is on message, and that's what the beauty of this is all about.
It was another interesting just reflection. I mean, I was thinking about having done this for a while, and there are some early creators in the YouTube space who got really big early on and still have big audiences, but they're 6-7 years into it and they're kind of flattening out a little bit, or maybe they're declining a little bit, and there are a lot of new creators that are coming up. But I think there's this big opportunity for a lot of these early on creators who got big on YouTube and have been doing it for 6 or 7 or 8 years, who maybe are looking to expand what they do, or maybe looking to do a little bit less of that, or there's an opportunity to work with some of these folks in ways that you might not have been able to 3 years ago. 2 or 3 years ago, some of these creators would have been like, I need millions of dollars or whatever, and now they're probably a lot more open to, let's work together on some of this stuff, and because I need to reinvent myself a little bit too.
Right.
So I don't know if you guys have seen that at all, but I think it's really interesting to see what does a YouTube star who's been doing it for 8 years do when they're not the new kid on the block anymore. They're not the big shiny new thing.
Right. And I think, Vince, you have been talking about this beacon to connect too, right? And the importance for brands to actually, put their hand up and say, hey, come and talk to us. Mention, here's what we can provide to you guys to help you create better content, right?
Absolutely, and that's part of an intense discovery process. We call it finding your brand soulmates and personifying the brands and the talent and ensuring the perfect match between the two. But that process also involves finding people who are authentic. Sometimes it involves finding people who are already advocates for your brand, and in that sense, they will actually go out and engage with their audiences with minimal incentives. They just want to be discovered. They want to be acknowledged by the brands that they love, and then they're off and running.
Right.
I think it was last year here we were talking about how the top 100 creators are really difficult to work with, but there's that big open space between like 100 and 1,000 that are a great white space to work with. And I wondered, are we still seeing that? Is that still a huge area of
Absolutely. I
opportunity?
mean, with the emergence of the A-list YouTube celebrities and celebrities on other social content platforms, there's a lot of people who aspire to be them.
Yeah.
So those are the people that if you get earlier on, You can engage with them with the CRM style of approach that I mentioned.
Right.
It's very similar to what Nike does with their grassroots type of approach, where they give sneakers away to students in high school, hoping that one of those students will be the next LeBron and be receptive to signing on with them as a major endorsement deal.
Right. I think we have time for one more question from the audience. So another question? One over here? Yeah.
Can you guys give an example of a brand that has kind of let go and let the creators do something with it and been successful with that?
I'm happy to. I mean, I think you look at like 11th Gorgeous and Secret. They let go and really let them do it. I think you look at Purina is doing this. I think Marriott's doing a good job of getting in and working with brands. We did a lot of work with Budweiser at Revision 3, and it was a struggle, but they let go and have done some really interesting things along those lines. Taco Bell, I think, has done a really good job letting go. Kia also. So there are brands, I think, if you look at what these guys have done on YouTube, that have really helped in that way. And, you know, I think, anyway, that's just an example. I'm sure you guys have others.
Yeah, and if you look at the new style of social content formats that are based on live stream, that really is about brands taking a leap of faith and letting go, because there's no real censorship there. And I was on Periscope the other day, and I believe it was Southwest who has an ambassador that's on there where they do it in such a way where it's so integrated, only a trained eye or a marketer could tell that it's part of a brand integration, but it's about a live stream where this stewardess talks about her experience on Southwest, where she travels all around the country, and how it's such a great company to work with, but in a very implied way. And that, to me, is an example of letting go, because in a live stream environment, you really can't control what's being said.
Yeah.